Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would make a motion to remove agenda item 7A, Case Adams presentation. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion or other agenda adjustments? Go ahead and vote. There is no online or.
I don't see him.
Okay, so all present.
It's recording, I see it now.
All board members who are participating are physically present, so we can vote by hand. All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Next up is the minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes of February 25th as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, all those in favor? Passes 4-0. Warrants, I would make a motion to approve regular warrant 18, payroll warrant 18, and main purse for February 2025. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Floor is open for public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. Jake?
Yeah, looks like BJ Bowden received a grant for $256 to fund materials to be used in creation of regular classroom boxes. So thank you to her for that.
Yep, great, thanks. Just like to acknowledge all of the teachers and staff, probably to a lesser degree students who've been struggling with all of the uncertainty that's kind of hanging over things. As we've discussed, I think our district is in a pretty strong position and there's no specific cause for concern. But I know that doesn't mean that there's not concern going around, and I'd just like to appreciate and acknowledge everybody's process. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, I have some things to acknowledge. At the recent UTC meeting, got some paperwork about students from Orono that are doing well, and I'd just like to name those. There's Callum Bryant, who's a student of the quarter in video and audio production. Casey Walston, who's in electrical. Ryder Drinkert, who's in CT exploratory, so they're students of the quarter. And then there's the state competition for Skills USA, and we have a whole bunch of Orono students that are competing in that. Asia Marzilli and also Amanda Peterson made a special remarks about the work that Asia is doing at UTC, but also Max Newman, Austin Speck, Jay Tweedy, Casey Walston, Sam Wingard, Caleb Bryant, and Rowan Jackson Sanborn. So a really good showing by Orono across a number of different areas. So I'm really proud of those students.
Great, thank you, Mark.
Nothing to me, thank you.
Anything from the students?
Not this time. Thank you.
Okay, superintendent?
Yes, kind of following on Kevin's theme, I wanted to recognize 3 of our students at OHS who are UTC students who put on I think Meredith talked a little bit about the project professionalism that Asia Marzilli, Austin Speck, and Jay Tweedy did here at school during Win-Win and another block. Other days it was a 3-part series that they were leading to offer things to other students here at the high school that they have learned in their program. I think they're all in business leadership, and they included topics like public speaking, interview skills, professional dress, business, and technical writing. And it was very well done. So kudos to them for bringing what they've learned at UTC back to try to share it with other students. Also, last week, I want to acknowledge Suzanne Neville and Angie McLaughlin, who organized the events at ASA for Read Across America Week. They had a lot of community readers they brought in, a lot of fun activities just to commemorate reading last week. And thank you to anyone who took part in being a community reader.
The delayed start cost me my reading spot.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
read a book
I know it.
about Pierre the Penguin. I didn't get to read it.
Would you like to
Sorry.
read it here?
It was a good book.
I bet you could reschedule with a teacher and they would probably.
No, I had not heard of that book, did not exist when my kids were in ASA, so I read this book, it was good.
Yeah, yeah, well, many of us enjoyed doing reading. I'm sorry yours got,
But I did get
Preempted
to
by
read
the
Peter
delay.
Penguin, so it wasn't complete.
and finally, the OMS chess team won state last weekend. So they are state champion chess elites. And I think are trying to pull together a plan to bring forward about potentially going to nationals. So I'm gonna take a look at that first before I bring that to you. But congratulations to the OMS chess team.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to reports. We'll start with Lisa, special services.
Sure, usually my my reports are pretty dry and just the facts, but I did want to shout out to Special Olympics and especially, unified basketball right now. There was a tournament this weekend that had, I believe, 6 or 8 schools participating at the high school. And teams played 2 games each. And if you need a smile, if you need a little bit of joy, go watch a unified basketball game. They're pretty amazing. I saw a game Saturday, and then this afternoon I saw a home middle school game. And I often sit in meetings with parents, and we talk about disabilities and things that their child needs support with. But it was really great to just look around and see the smiles on the faces of parents and of players and those that are the parents of the kids that are supporting the kids that are also playing. It's a boost. So if you ever have time to catch a unified game, I would highly advise it. Moving on to my report, Meredith and I participated in a CDS cohort 2 conversational meeting. There were quite a few people there. There were, stakeholders from, Maine education. There were a lot of folks from CDS, and then there were a lot of folks that are very interested in taking part in the second cohort. So those that are kind of going to pursue looking at this, we're going to meet every 2 weeks to just continue to build a plan and answer questions or ask questions. I recently attended a director's meeting, and there's a lot more interest in our region than was there earlier this year. I think, Old Town's jumping on Brewer, Herman, Greenbush, Hamden, Orrington, just a lot more interest than we were seeing in the very beginning of the whole process. So it's kind of, it's reassuring, because with everybody kind of jumping in at the same time, I feel like there are going to be more opportunities to help each other cover some of the needs that are going to arise. Meredith and I were working on a readiness assessment today. We left there with more questions than answers, but that's okay. We've got direction on where we can go. Susan helped as well, as far as answering those questions and seeing how prepared we are. And that was really kind of assessing our current 4-year-old program. So I'll meet with Lindsay Ruggery and folks from ASA, and hopefully we'll have a better idea. One of the most significant changes that we learned about at that last meeting were that the RSUs are not going to be, if we were to jump on board, what the expectation was, jumping on board for cohort 2 would mean that on July 1st, schools would be responsible for FAPE and providing summer services for students, but they're changing that because these kids are already in programs. They already have ESY or extended school year services, summer school as part of their programs. So they're making it so schools will be responsible in September when our students start school. They are also, if we're looking at costs in preparation for our needs, funds are going to begin to be available in April. Anything we get between April and October will be deducted from that first quarterly reimbursement that we get. So those were 2 very good pieces of news. So that's kind of what I came away from there with. So recently, I was looking again at our social work services, with Erin, our Acadia or Northern Light social worker back from maternity leave, looking at our wait list and how that looks. There are currently no students on the wait list, so that was super exciting. They're being more creative in putting some of their students in groups. Some of the students need to work on social communication skills or problem solving skills or interpersonal skills, and they've got groups working on those. They're also able to form some grief groups. I mean, we've had quite a higher number than you would expect of students at the high school and middle school that have experienced a loss of a parent or some other significant loss. And it's nice to be able to put those groups together for students that need it. We've also started meeting quarterly. Sam and I have met with the folks from Northern Light in an administrative level. We meet with them several times a year, but what came out of our last meeting was their social workers saying, would really be good to pull in our guidance counselors and tighten up our referrals, because sometimes we're getting referrals for students, parents call, they can't get outside services, so they want to squeeze a student in. But we were realizing we really needed to develop some kind of a triage threshold, because you've got a student who's lost a parent to death, and you've got a student who is having trouble with their boyfriend. We've got to look at prioritizing our needs and figuring out how we're going to deliver services in the most effective way and meet the needs of more students. So we started quarterly meetings with Sam, guidance counselors from all three schools, our school-based social worker, and also our school-based social worker and case manager. We have that also service in our schools. So I think we had a really productive meeting. We met a week or two ago and set up another meeting, and it was good to have the conversation and realize, everybody's here for each other. So I'm excited about that. Lastly, another thing that came from my director's meeting is we had a conversation about tutoring services for students that are hospitalized. We're seeing a lot more students, and usually this involves a mental health hospitalization. We have inpatient, and we also have like a day treatment Acadia program that provides tutoring for students while they're involved in those services. What we had always had for our inpatient kids was we paid somebody through the Bangor school system to go ahead and provide services. And what we're always asked, I get a letter every time a student goes either inpatient or to day treatment, and we're asked, does the school want to supply materials, or does do you want to let the tutor come up with the materials? And I always for my older kids in middle school to high school, because they were able to use Google Classroom, I would say use the school materials, because it was all right there in Google Classroom, and that worked really well to keep them up with the program as much as they were able to keep up. And then for younger kids, I would say, just, provide them with something that's age appropriate. Things have changed. They've moved away from allowing Bangor School to send in an educator, and they use an online service called LearnWell. And what we're finding is we're sometimes charged for services prior to even authorizing the services. People were concerned that the kids are no longer allowed to access their Google Classroom. So how effective was tutoring? And especially kids in the high school, they're taking classes. I mean, we always meet when they come back, and we talk about how we're going to make their load of work manageable so that they can come in and still not be overwhelmed, but be able to earn their credits towards graduation. And this kind of throws a monkey wrench into that. So there's a lot of discussion among area special ed directors about, are we going to continue to pay for these services? Bangor is pretty adamant that they're not. Everybody else is a little shy about responding that way. I think what I'm gonna do is I'll probably reach out to parents and have a conversation before I make a decision, because I'd like them to be in on that conversation. So just, and it's also increased our charges for tutoring pretty significantly. So just wanted to share that with you guys and see if you have any questions about it.
Thank you, and thank you for that last update. In particular, it's an issue I had never thought about before. Are there any questions or comments? No, great, thank you, Lisa. We'll go ahead and move on to we'll go to Director of Learning, Susan.
Good evening, everybody. My board report is 9 pages long, longer than typical, but we wanted to include information and details with board members that we'd shared with the state around Chapter 104, and make sure you had background information around the process and the journey we've taken at the ACES school around K-5 literacy. And so I'm not going to go through all those details, but there's lots of information there for you, for those that are interested in digging more deeply. The first page of my report highlights some of the professional development and activities happening this week. Tomorrow is actually an early release day, and we are doing youth suicide awareness and prevention training in person across the district for all our employees. That's required once every 5 years, and we'll keep track of who's able to attend tomorrow and do makeup sessions as needed as well. And then Lynn Lyons comes and talks with our kids and parents on Thursday. And on Friday, she'll be meeting with staff during our district-wide professional development day. Also on Friday, we have several mini U sessions that I just wanted to bring to your attention. We're going to have integrating computer science with Angela Oxley from Educate Maine, data talks and helping students make sense of graphs through questioning with Francie Peterson from the university, School AI with a representative from that organization to help us pilot that resource with teachers and students in grades 6 through 12. Wabanaki resources and ways to integrate Wabanaki studies into your classroom, but Jim Butil and Deb White are helping with that. Working on EDIPT, thanks to Margie Innes, people will get some support on their educational development and improvement plan. Brad Martin's going to help us learn about using IXL to its full extent. Jill Conley and Janet Metcalf are helping with classroom and behavior management, ideas and tips post-COVID. And I'm going to lead a group on further engagement around student engagement for those interested in digging deeper into some of the resources and ideas we talked about back in January. And then the day will end with some wellness sessions. We've got yoga, tap dancing, responsive classroom, paint and sip, and the opportunity for folks that would rather work on professional things on their to-do list to do those rather than participate in the wellness activities if that's what they choose. So looking forward to the rest of this week. Pages 2 through 6 in my report are from the process the state used this school year to help us report back to them on what our Chapter 104 Gifted and Talented program looks like. And we found this exercise really helpful. I would really like to thank Wendy Peterson and Katie Quark for their work on developing our Chapter 104 program, helping to refine and articulate that in a way that would make sense to people. And really also want to point out that our classroom teachers are really working hard to make adjustments and changes in how we help support and stretch our accelerated students so that they have a pathway that works well for them. Part of that report to the state included some data that is on page 5 of my written report. This data and some other parts of the report to the states and our explanations to parents were the topics that we used to talk about in our steering committee meeting that we had for Chapter 104 last month. And some of the pieces in the data that caught our eye were pleased that 15.5% of our students across the district are receiving some sort of accelerated support, either directly through Katie Quark or Wendy Pearson. Also, Miss Moore through our art program, particularly at the middle school. We didn't count students that might be in other AP classes, or maybe they're in advanced band. Maybe they're doing some special lessons in strings or an orchestra down at the elementary school. These are really the students that are in direct contact of some way or another with our Chapter 104 teachers. So it's nice to be free from the state rule of 2 to 5%. And really feel like we're doing a better job of meeting the needs of our students. Low socioeconomic status, that's a discrepancy between the percent of students in our district and the percent of students that are receiving Chapter 104 services that we really are working on and wanting to think about more deeply, making sure that kids have the support and the options of opting in to try some challenges no matter what their background might be. Another place that we noticed a difference is between our white and non-white students. About half the percent across the district are receiving Chapter 104 services compared to the percent of those in the general ed population. We aren't really surprised about the percentages with special ed students, and especially special ed students in some of those other categories. They're just, we don't have them in the district, so we can't have a percent of those into our Chapter 104 programs, but are pleased that there are students that have IEPs and 504s that are also receiving Chapter 104 support as well. So those are the pieces there that caught our attention as we were thinking through this together as a group. And then I think it starts on page 7 to the end of my report. Our the journey ACE is a timeline of the journey that ASA is on right now, really going back to last school year. I think we could have gone back even further, but I started with some information around SMART goals we had for $23,000 for grant funds from the state. And the outcome of those goals are what we reported to the state back in September. I think it was Mark, but maybe it was somebody else also who asked at the last board meeting for sort of where are we with phonics, phonemic awareness, morphology. So there is a link in my report that shows you a scope and sequence that is still in draft form, but getting really close to being ready for public viewing. And there's a little bit of a different version that has, more acronyms, more details, more page numbers and things like that for teachers. But we do have a scope and sequence for phonemic awareness all the way up to, Latin Greek roots from kindergarten up to grade 5. That was some great work that the teachers have done. And Angie McLaughlin has helped a lot with that. We based our decision-making and our process for looking at core instructional materials through some resources that the state of Maine was able to provide us. The way our state is set up and the constraints of the DOE, they can't make recommendations to us, but they can share with us what other states use. And so we looked to Arizona, who have spent a lot of time vetting programs and rating them. And in addition to that, we used information from Ed Reports and What Works Clearinghouse. Went through a pretty lengthy process of narrowing down the fields to initially 4 that we thought we'd like to pilot, but when we put out to teachers who would like to pilot what, there was one program that nobody was interested in. So by the time we reported to the state, we had 3 different programs that we started, made plans to pilot and take more in-depth looks at. My View and Wonders, there's some links there in the report that take you to the websites to give you a sense of what those are like. They're really comprehensive programs from big publishers. The other 2 that we ruled out, EL and Wit and Wisdom, were really heavily focused on building content knowledge and vocabulary, less so on some of the pieces that we felt we also needed around decoding phonics, it just didn't offer enough for what we were looking for our students. So we have some really important next steps coming up at ASA on Friday the 14th. We're going to do a fishbowl activity where people who have been piloting My View will be in the middle of the fishbowl. Other staff members around the outside, and those folks in the middle will be talking about their experience piloting, what they've liked, what they've learned, what they have questions or concerns about, and then we'll switch and have folks from Wonders be in the fishbowl while others hear about their conversation around the outsides. Angie's going to lead that conversation, and Carrie and Maddie take some good notes so that during a staff meeting on March 19th, we can have a full staff discussion about next steps and where we should go after people have had a chance to really dig into these materials and hear about experiences of their colleagues. Yeah, so lots going on in the world of director of learning.
Great, thanks. Could you, I remember a year or so ago, some discussion about how the DOE was gonna modify the 2 to 5% GT Chapter 104, but I'm not sure I know the full final story. It sounds like there is one. Could you just update me a little bit on that?
I think there really is not quite a full final story. The DOE is still advocating for and supporting moving away from that 2 to 5%. That has not been changed in the legislative level, however.
Okay.
So sort of best practices and legal requirements haven't quite matched up. But and I don't know if the DOE has a plan to move forward with bringing that change to legislature at this time or not. But that's one of the things that when we were asked by the state, what are some of our needs and hopes, we definitely tried to make clear that our hope was that we could continue under this model that we have now, using the MTSS and supporting students based on their needs rather than a cut percent.
So what's the guidance on what's reimbursable and fundable if it's not based on the 2 to 5?
Right. So it has been a couple years. I think the very first summer I was here, they asked from the DOE for a report similar to this, but different. And that's part of why they asked, I think, in these reports back to the state, how much are you spending on gifted and talented or Chapter 104? I have heard of no talk about changing how they reimburse for that. Basically, it really is, what have you spent 2 years ago that gets put into the formula for EPS, a couple years down the road. So I think that will continue as is and hasn't been impacted at this point. I don't know if Meredith's hearing anything differently around that, but I have not.
I guess I'm still puzzled by that because, it was always based on a continuance of effort model. Yeah. But there was this sort of inherent cap that you could only have effort for 2 to 5%. Now, what's, not to say we would do this, but what's to prevent us from saying 50% of our students are GT identified and, trying to have we'd have to fund it for 2 years, but have a continuance of effort model under that kind of a.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And maybe it is just sort of the honor system of what program you have in place, how many kids you're serving, and is your staff doing what you say they are? I'm really not, I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
I think there is a person in the state that's reviewing these reports and would, I am guessing, raise a flag if we're way out of step with state, law around what we can claim.
I imagine if there was a big step jump in our spending,
right,
that would also raise a flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, student report.
Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. We have a lot to report on this week actually. So starting with school culture, the OHS Student Council will be having a movie night on March 21st at 8 p.m.
OHS Spirit Week starts March 17th.
Last week was Read Across America Week at ASA.
Grades 5 to 8 will attend an assembly on Thursday for students feeling friendship, family, and simple lessons, big impact.
For academics, congratulations to the new members of the National Art Honor Society who were inducted last night. Thank you, Mrs. Barnes, for all her hard work putting this together.
Congratulations to the new National Honor Society members who will be inducted tomorrow night, March 12th. Thank you to Ms. Goodall.
Good luck to all the students taking the SAT next Wednesday, March 19th.
Extracurricular and co-curricular grade checks will be on Monday, March 17th.
UMaine Early College summer classes are available for students to sign up for now.
Students are signing up for next year's courses currently.
Tomorrow's a half day.
This Thursday, Lynn Lyons will be giving a talk to students on phone usage and mental health.
Additionally, she will be holding a talk for parents Thursday night.
Pre-K and kindergarten registration is currently open.
As for activities, the show choir showcase is next Friday, March 21st. Come support our Ace Adams, OMS, and OHS show choirs.
Congratulations to the OHS show choir who competed at districts a few weeks ago. We wish them luck at the show choir state competition.
Spring sports signups are available to students now.
Next Tuesday, the 18th, spring sports will have preseason meetings after school.
The OMS Red Cross the Disciplines class visited the Maine legislature today.
The Husson women's soccer team visited OMS on March 6th.
Congrats to the OMS chess team for winning the state championship.
Congrats to the 2 OMS students who qualified for the state math counts competition.
Congrats to the OMS cheer team for finishing second at the Maine State Youth competition, as well as an earned runner-up honors at the recent PPML cheer competition, and no student concerns at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Go ahead and move on to superintendent's report.
I just wanted to thank Susan for that detailed follow-up about the, particularly the ELA curriculum process at ASA. You can see, you know, a lot of time and consideration and thought has been put into that, and I think it's been a well designed process. And, you know, we'll be bringing forward after the curriculum meeting in April is when that recommendation will come to that committee, and then you can see the board meeting the 29th. So it's, you know, we're presuming we're going to buy something in the budget. So I think we've budgeted just based on what we feel like is the higher amount of the two to make sure we have enough to buy whatever the teachers settle on, the school settles on. Do you have any questions about that? Because I know you had some questions last time. You didn't. Did that answer what you were hoping to find out about where we were and what we had done?
I just took a quick look at the scope and sequence. It looks like it's a very detailed.
Yeah.
And very in keeping with my understanding of the direction of travel that is being encouraged. So that, yeah, that's all sounds commendable.
Okay. Okay, good. Lisa also reported on something I was going to mention, just to add to what she said about the cohort 2 for the 3-year-old programming. The other thing we've done since we last talked is we had a meeting with BZ, with their superintendent, their special ed director, and their business manager. And that was really informative for us because they have been doing this all year, particularly for the business side of it, to learn a little bit more about how that's worked for them. And then programmatically, how they've managed. They actually opened up a classroom in their building to serve students, and they're serving students mainly, you know, through a school-based classroom, but also there's some other, I think, services happening outside of the school. They are not working with CDS at all. So there's just a full range of choices. Other districts are not having any students really served in their schools. They're doing it in outplacement. So we're just learning a lot right now to consider what might be the best path forward for us. I'm not seeing any red flags of concern at this point for moving forward, but you know, we have time yet to decide, and we'll be bringing it back to you when we feel like we have enough information to bring forward a solid recommendation one way or the other for you all to consider and either endorse or say, we're not comfortable, let's wait. So we'll continue to update you as we learn more, but even things that were true for cohort 1 are now being changed for cohort 2, just because, you know, they're learning as they go. So I think, you know, there are advantages to starting now, which is maybe to have more resources thrown at the programs early on. But you're also part of, you know, them figuring things out, and cohort 2 probably took the brunt of most of that. So I appreciate those districts doing that, but I think we're going to benefit from their having, you know, help the state figure this out for everyone. Maddie came in, they had pre-K, K registration until, I don't know, 6, probably 15, that it was very active when I left and came back up here. Lots of families coming through with either pre-Kers or upcoming K students. I want to also recognize the ASA student ambassadors were down there providing tours, doing a great job, being ambassadors for the school and taking families and future students out on tours of the school. So they did a great job with that. The last thing I want to just update outside of items in the agenda. Since we last met, both Jason and I have been involved with our cyber insurance carrier Beasley to finally get some traction on getting information about a cybersecurity audit that came from our discussion when we talked about the PowerSchool breach. And they have sent over just a menu of options for us to consider. There's a free option and then there are tiers of other options. So Jason and I are going to review those and consider how to move forward with that, but they certainly have plenty of choices for us to take. And then I was connected over with one of the law firms that Beasley sends clients to, and we have kind of preferred rates with them through this our insurance carrier. And I had a consult with them and told them about our situation and got some advice. And I've decided that we're going to engage this firm to help us primarily with Social Security impacted individuals. Because what I learned from this consult is that the PowerSchool notifications do not meet the threshold for what is required for notification for Social Security numbers specifically. And they are going to help us with that, with drafting the letter and making sure we're sending it out particularly to folks who are no longer with us and we don't necessarily know their address at this point. There are processes you have to go through to obtain last known mailing address to make sure you're meeting, the notification requirements and trying to get the notification to these individuals who you don't necessarily have a good address for anymore. And they said, for example, I asked about what about pushing for more coverage? And they basically said, you're not going to get anywhere with that because they're going beyond what's required by law. 1 year is kind of the industry standard and what's required in most states. 18 months is the most required by any state. And it's just a couple states and maybe DC. And they're going with 2 years. And she said that we would not get anywhere with that kind of, attempt to push back on PowerSchool. She said that in their letter they're doing to Social Security impacted individuals, they actually indicate, give some other things that they recommend families would do, which is a freezing of your identity, which is a lot more effective way than identity theft protection, which is actually, an after the fact notification and going online and freezing. There's a process that they can help us share with people how to do. So I feel like they're going to give us some good advice and help us make sure we're meeting the legal requirements around particularly Social Security number. They strongly advise that we did not attempt any notifications beyond Social Security number ourselves. PowerSchool is sending out notifications, but are being very slow to do so. They have sent out staff notifications and from what we can tell, notifications to our students who are 18 or older. We haven't seen any notifications yet coming to students under 18. If anyone gets one, please let me know because, PowerSchool doesn't tell us they're sending these out, when they're sending these out. But we have seen some of the ones that have gone out to 18-year-old and above students, and they're specific about Social Security number and about medical information. That's specific on the notification. Those are the only 2 categories that they're being specific about. And according to the attorney, that's appropriate in their view. And when I talked to her about the alerts that we had on there for like guardian alert or a disability alert. The attorney said that wasn't enough information to trigger any kind of notification requirement, that it's just, not enough PII in the eyes of the law to notify in any other way than just the general notification that Power School's doing. So that's what I learned. I feel like the attorney gave us really good advice to protect ourselves and to really protect our families in the best way possible around social security number. I've reached out to a couple families just to ask if they've received notifications that I knew were social security number affected, and those families are, concerned they haven't received notification yet, but we're in this middle point of, I want to give them official notification. I don't want to do it the wrong way. So we're working right now to get that going with the attorneys, quickly. Do you have any questions or feedback about any of that?
A lot of unnecessary work, unfortunately, for people. Not to mention stress and risk for students, but the attorney, is that being covered by our insurance, or are we paying that?
We're gonna have to pay some. We'll have some covered by the insurance. So I need to, once I get, the endorsement letter was kind of a general, or the engagement letter. Gave me rates, and it depends on the level of attorney, and I think that this will be a pretty minimal job for them. But we will have to pay some, but it covers a portion.
Yeah, I guess I'm less worried about the fact that we're paying, is the fact that Power Schools is not paying. Or, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna end up as an amount of money, but it's not worth our time and energy to sue Power Schools, but.
Yeah, I mean, unless
We should
there's
at least send
some
a bill to Power School.
larger class action that
Yeah.
happens that we can join in on. The next time I talk with them, because I did forget to ask that question, I'm gonna ask that question.
Cause I
They
mean,
know that.
there's legal fees, but there's your time, there's Jason's time, and
Right,
Melissa's
it's
time,
been,
and,
yeah, I mean,
I'm sure
and
it's-
we just have a small amount of data.
yeah.
Because we've only been using it for 5 or 6 years. I mean, I can't imagine these districts that have, decades of data in the system. So,
Yeah, I mean, going alone probably doesn't make financial sense or time sense, but I certainly would be interested in a class action if.
Yeah.
It's gotta be tens of thousands of dollars of time by the time you take your time and Jason and Melissa's time and
yeah,
lawyer's
Rachel's
time.
working on it, and yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Was that it for the report?
That's it for the times.
All right, next up, we have the board survey. So as you all up here know, we, every year, I think it's been 6, 7 years at least now that we've been doing this, we have a series of 360 surveys. The first one typically in February is the board. The next one typically in March is the superintendent. And then there's a school survey, principal survey that happens in April. That's something that the superintendent and the principals do. We don't, the board does not participate and look at those surveys. And so we have 2 items on the agenda tonight. One is to discuss the board survey results, which I hope you all got. I sent that out Monday afternoon. And then also we need to make sure we have agreement on what we want to ask for the superintendent survey, and then I can execute sending that survey out. Normally, so the document itself is not shareable as it stands because there's comments that pertain to specific employees and things like that, which they have a right to privacy, so it's not a document we can directly share. On the other hand, the comments about the board is public information. So usually what we've tried to do is to just take a little time at a board meeting where each of us reflects publicly on what we heard and took out of the survey. Obviously avoiding the details about specific employees and or anything else would be inappropriate to discuss in public, but trying to make sure that we're reflective and responsive about what's coming back. So unless there's a question, I think we should go ahead and launch into that.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Roughly how many surveys went out between staff and community, roughly?
This was definitely a down year. We got, I think, 20-something, 22
And 14.
community and 14
Yeah.
staff. And those numbers have historically been closer to 50 to 60.
I think we did the climate survey in January
Yeah,
and maybe it felt a little close to that.
I mean, that's just one thing that struck me. Like, only 14 staff and
I know.
22 community members, and I'm guessing it was probably over 1,000 of these between the two groups, I'm guessing.
Oh,
it went out by email.
it goes out to a
It
big,
goes out to all the parents, all the staff, all the teachers. You're right, over 1,000
Yeah.
people.
I mean, it's a terrible.
Historically, response rates have been, like I say, higher. More than half, a third to a half of the staff typically historically have responded. The parent community, parents are busy and fly by, but more like 60 or 70. So it was low, like Meredith says. The timing was completely typical, the 2-week window, the fact that one of those weeks was over spring break and there were a couple days after they came back from spring
we
break.
did it that way last year.
Yeah, it was a typical timing. I don't think it was the timing per se. It could have been the fact that we moved our climate surveys to January. I think there was a little bit in the survey results themselves, but I've also this year and last year had some side emails from staff who basically say, well, the board doesn't listen to us anyway, so we're not gonna bother. I think last time I talked about the difference between listening and doing what you tell us to do, right? So I would agree, we have not always done what we were told to do in the surveys, and almost always there's conflicting opinions about what we should do in the surveys, so we have not always done what the staff asks us to do in the surveys, but I would object pretty robustly to the not listening characterization of that. And indeed, I took there were a number of things, some of which, are too minute or too personal to discuss here, but I took some really constructive, positive, not necessarily positive, some of it was quite critical, but really constructive and useful feedback out of things from staff comments that I think are actionable as we go into budget season and so forth. So personally, I would just like to reiterate that obey, no, but listen is always been, I think, a pretty strong feature of how we respond to these surveys. But, it's ultimately a volunteer activity. If staff chooses not to fill it out, that's their choice. I guess the same for the community. We'll just have to keep going forward and see how the numbers keep going down at some point. We have to question the exercise, but on the other hand, I think this is a fairly unique opportunity. There's not a lot of districts I know of in Northern Maine that do this, and it's a pretty direct channel for people to communicate with the board. So I personally always valued it, and I hope it picks up again. Other questions or comments before we? Anybody want to go first? As always, I can talk and go first, but I don't need to go first. Anybody else want to go first with what they took out of it?
Started, so
Yeah.
guess I'll finish up. Other than the low participation rate, the other thing I noticed is the average score between staff and community was pretty close to each other, so it was kind of the same scoring. And then I read through everything, and to me, there weren't a lot of themes, but the one theme that I did notice, and it was kind of on both sides of it, was this battle between SEL and academics. Some people saying that we're doing too much SEL and academics is suffering. Some people saying we're not doing enough SEL. So there was kind of this battle between SEL and academics that was really probably the strongest theme that I saw, and I couldn't help but wonder, why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't it be both? So those are my observations.
Anybody else want to go?
I can go next, I guess. I think there was, just to circle back to response rating, but I think the low response rate with the staff could be at least somewhat a factor of, we have a lot of staff who've been here for the entirety of the existence of this survey, and so this is now the 7th, 8th, 9th time they're being asked to take essentially the same survey. We've tweaked it a little bit, but less in recent years. So that could be part of it. I mean, that's true for some community members as well, but there's more turnover in the community, and plus you also get new parents coming in, there's new kids after school, so that might be part of what's going on here. In terms of overall, actually, one more thing before I get to overall themes, as is almost always the case in these, there's, as Jake kind of alluded to, there's a lot of diversity of opinion, sometimes around the same issues. Some people really like something, some people really don't, and when you've got low response rates, it's kind of hard to make anything of that, right? I mean, it's an opinion and it's noted, but when you're dealing with an N of 14, unless all 14 people say the same thing, it's hard to know what to do with that. That being said, I do think one theme that came through extremely clearly to me was among the community members, there was almost unanimous approval of the acceleration and differentiation opportunities that are being provided at the middle school and the high school, and a wish for more of those, right? So that was pretty clear. The second theme that I took out of this was maybe it certainly wasn't nearly as one-sided, but it does seem to me, at least among the community members that responded, and maybe a little bit of staff too, that there still seems to be, some sources of discontent or conflict or unhappiness at the high school that's still bubbling around there. So those are kind of the takeaways that I saw. There's a lot of other important ideas out there, but again, with small ends and diversity of opinion, it's hard to know what to do with those other than noted and see if we can find out more. And also, I guess the last thing I'll say is I also continue to find this to be a valuable exercise. Sometimes it's not pleasant when you're called out by name in this valuable exercise, but it's still valuable. So I would like to continue it, but if, as Brian said, if it gets to the point where no one's responding, then we will have to revisit that. But I think for now, I think it's useful. I'm down.
You wanna go, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll echo some ideas at this point. I like to echo Mark's point about it is valuable talking to the camera or whatever. But also, inviting the public to come to public comment. You definitely don't have to stay the whole 2 or 3 hours. But we do want to hear, as Brian says, we want to listen. And the difficulty of doing, obeying, as you point out, is to Mark's point that, I was reading this earlier today, and you would read, "This is awful," and the next line is, "This is great." I mean, sort of opposite ends, and yeah, I can cherry pick those to the things that I agree with to say, look, there's evidence for it. But it is very hard to interpret the pulse of staff or community. I see folks talking about how great ASA is, and then how it lacks in differentiated instruction. And I feel for Wendy Pearson, who has, all of ASA to kind of, all of those students to work with and teachers to support, which is an impossible task essentially. And same with Katie Quirk, 6 through 12. So, there's 2 people sort of leading the charge there along with these differentiated tracks. So there are some people happy with them and some people who are angry about them. And to Jake's point about SEL and academics, I also don't see why they can't be components of a well-rounded education. And I think the board and the administration likes to hear from community and staff, but it's difficult because there are these polarities. And so if we do anything, it will upset someone. If we do the middle, we'll upset the poles. If we're at one end of the pole, we'll upset the other balance. So I hope folks do watch or at least hear these things that, there's a variety of views at the board, and we, I think, do work well with the chair to come up with some sort of solution that respects autonomy and makes use of resources and tries to balance these things out. I saw some critiques of that we only serve college-bound students. And I know there's active work going on for students that are not interested or not planning on going to college, like UTC and exploratory programs. So I think there's strong support for those. And I do wonder if this is, for some people, maybe only a few, they're one opportunity to talk to the board, but they're also not maybe watching recordings. Not the most interesting YouTube video, certainly, or
Understatement.
or they don't want to show up for several hours on a Tuesday night. So maybe there is a communication problem there, and I don't have a solution. But I saw some comments in this that said this wasn't happening. I'm like, no, this is happening. Like, we just did this, or we've been talking about this. And so someone is either angry and doesn't know, or angry and doesn't want to know. That was my takeaway.
It is interesting though, back before meetings were available online and before COVID, we used to get way more people coming in person. It was never a packed house, but there would routinely be at least a handful of people. You get one or two public comments. So then COVID hit, right, and we changed all this stuff, but now we have an online option and people don't show up to make comments there either. I mean, that's easy, right? You could literally get here. We do the first public comment within the first at most 15 minutes, and it's usually less than that. So you get on Zoom, you listen to the Pledge of Allegiance, a couple of agenda adjustments, you get an opportunity to, we do acknowledgements, most of us decline, and then you have an opportunity to do public comment, and then you can leave. And you can do so from the comfort of your living room. So, I mean, the opportunity's there. I'm sure some people saw, that the Bangor City Council is changing their or thinking about changing their public comment policy. So the opportunity is there. I just wish more people would take advantage of it, right?
Agreed.
I'd say some of the thoughts I had, I think I've heard many of them echoed already, but there was almost a bimodal distribution both among teachers and among parents, people who are really happy and really unhappy. You guys didn't see the individual responses, but there was one person who rated us 1 on every single question. They didn't provide a single piece of text-based feedback, and so it was really hard to know what to do with that other than this person's really unhappy. But clearly both. Last year I had more of a sense that everybody was pretty unhappy, and this year I had much more of a sense of it was kind of bimodal. There were people who were really unhappy, and there were people who were pretty happy. Yeah, I had similar thoughts about SEL like you, Mark. I actually noticed specifically a lot of teachers expressed displeasure with the kind of acceleration opportunities and flex opportunities being.
This was pretty much across the board.
Yeah, but the parents and not that this is a vote kind of thing, but there were significant numbers of parents who expressed very positive
Yes.
features about it
And wanted more.
And in particular, not to pick on schools, because this is the thing that rotates among schools and challenges, but in particular, I think at ASA was highlighted as a place where parents were really expressing an interest in visit, because we just put a lot of attention at the middle school and the high school and address some of that, but wanting some more focus on differentiated instruction. Like I said, there were some really specific comments. Many of them only came from one person, so I wouldn't call them themes, but they were noted comments about resources around summer school, resources around multi-language learners. Some other very specific comments that I noticed. There were just a couple beginning to approach the outlines of a theme about classroom appearance and upgrades. And so to me, we'll talk about our capital plan and how much money we have been spending. I think people tend to notice paint in classrooms and not notice roofs, and we're digging out of such a deep well. We were at the place where it was literally roofs and asphalt that was about to cave into a sinkhole. And, so there's probably, to me, what I take away from that is that there's a communication opportunity to better communicate what our 5-year plan looks like and how we're getting into have gotten into classrooms, and will be even more getting into classrooms with upgrades. I think those were the main things I took out of it. Maybe else have a second thought you want to share, or everybody happy with where we're at? I guess one question conversation I'd like to have with the students is, we have in past years just mailed this particular survey to students and not gotten a lot of response, which I understand, because a lot of questions are about school boards and things. And I know I did not think about school boards when I was a high school student. And I appreciate our 2 students who do think about that. But, in hindsight, it's not deeply surprising to me that students didn't engage with this particular survey, but I wonder if there's some opportunity for a completely differently constructed. Do you think students would, I don't know, just an open-ended question. What would you like the school board to know about your experience in RSU 26 and type that and answer, or do you think there is a constructive way to get student feedback?
I think that if like a form has more than 2 questions max on it, a student's not gonna respond. Like, even me, and I love forms. I see one that has more, and like, if they're like a free response question, I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I put it on the back burner and then eventually I forget about it, it never happens.
I feel like, definitely the types of forms I see getting the most responses are when they're distributed by advisors during win-win.
Yeah, if they're like
yeah.
sit down and they have to do it.
If it's like more interactive, also like something that came to mind would be like if every advisor gave each student like a post-it note and then asked a student to write like one problem and one good thing with the school and then collected them. I feel like something like that would be a lot more likely to get responses, just like a few words and distributed and collected by advisors just one day. If students are left to their own devices, they probably won't do it though.
Yeah, what my advisor does is that she like really won't let us leave the room or anything until we sit down and do a form. Like, I've been locked like into the, not locked into the room, but like not allowed to leave the room, like forced to sit at my desk and do the form until I leave. And like, it makes me do it. So I think that's a good way. But also I think one problem is that a lot of kids just like don't understand why they're doing the form. Like cause like one day they're just told that they're doing it like the same day. And they're like, no, like I wanna do this during advising instead. And they're just, and then because they're frustrated, like they just like click through it. So I think one thing is definitely letting kids know in advance and constantly reminding them that it's gonna happen. Because one of the most annoying things in my opinion is when I like have a whole plan for win-win or something. And then like I'm told day of that I have to sit down and take like a 30-minute long form. First of all, it should not be 30 minutes long, like 5 minutes max probably. But yeah, definitely like no advance. And I think if we want to send one out, like me and Connor can do a lot of work, like doing that student kind of like from the student, like why we're doing this, whatever, because I think it's a lot better coming from us, from the student perspective, than it would be. It's just like an email or like an advisor just telling them what they're doing. But yeah, that's my take.
Okay, that's some good helpful feedback, doing it during class time,
Yeah.
maybe, coming from the teachers as generic feedback on the district as opposed to coming from the board in an email. So are all things I think we could talk about next year to implement.
Yeah, I think if students were left to their own devices, like even I wouldn't do it, to be honest with you. I would so forget to do it. I have so many emails in my inbox right now that like it would just never happen. But yeah, if you like set a time during advisory and let the students know in advance and like have the advisors like make sure the students all submit it, I think that definitely would get a better response for you.
Okay.
But let me ask you this, Brian, and Jake too probably can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that back in pre-COVID times, our student reps used to come with more concerns from students, right? Like students had sought them out and like they had an issue with the grading system, or they had an issue with, this after school, or there was just more of that. Am I wrong, or is my memory accurate on that?
Definitely been up and down, but you're right. I think pre-COVID, there was more kind of, I would like to see this issue addressed.
That's what I was thinking about that a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember the last time.
Muse.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think Muse was the last time.
But it seemed to me like it used to be more common. Some was big stuff, some was, seemingly smaller stuff, like, we need 5 more minutes for lunch or stuff like that.
Yeah, 92 versus 90 is the cutoff for
Yes.
an
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of those.
A. Jim credit for getting letters.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of
There
stuff.
were all kinds of things that bubbled up, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the survey is one way. I mean,
Yeah, to put in student minds that there is a path to influence the board, I think the surveys could maybe help students remember that. And I like the feedback that they gave, both Torsten and Connor. I know there are several people on the screen here who are involved with student surveys, so.
Yep.
But students also had to do the climate survey in January or February. I forget when it was, Susan. I think it was. So they too have just, and that was a pretty long survey.
Yes.
So
Yeah, if I hadn't been.
that's
forced
probably
to
the
take
one they
that
locked you in your
advisory-
classroom for, Dorsa, that you had to do.
Yeah, if I hadn't been forced down Miss Fork to do that survey, that never would have happened for me, but yeah. Actually, me and Connor were working on a form to like work on that, but then we were also struggling how to set it up. Because I think like if you just send a form like, oh, like right here, like any concern you might have, like I generally do not think that like any student would fill it out. So that's something we're working on, figuring out like what the best way is to like promote it. We've been doing a lot of brainstorming.
We used a strategy during the development of the strategic plan that I'm wondering if it would be something to consider. So when we were trying to get student feedback on the strategic plan, one of the early drafts, Sam and I each had a group of representative students from different advisories, and we did listening sessions where we essentially had, like a 30 to 45-minute discussion with students about their thoughts. And I wonder, what Dorsa and Connor would be able to yield from a similar kind of listening session from students and advisories, just because, it was a self-perpetuating discussion in which students, as they talked and as they listened to one another, realized their own perspective overlapping in areas, or maybe felt like the road was cleared by someone else that allowed them to share what they wanted to say. And it felt like a really rich discussion. So that might be something that would yield the kind of insights we're looking for.
Yeah, maybe another model would just be having Dorsa and Connor visiting different advisories, right, rotating through. Might or might not have time to visit all of them, but lots of times people are happier to share things verbally than writing down. Seems like schoolwork. Talking doesn't seem like schoolwork, so.
Make sure you let Dorsa know ahead of time, so she doesn't, you'll bring it on her the day, and if she has something else to do, then you'll be.
Which is when you to finish homework.
I'm a very spontaneous person.
That's all good ideas. I think we should pursue that. Possibly this spring. I mean, I guess I'd say to this, both of you, that we're happy to help put resources behind that in terms of time advisories or getting forms filled out. It's also something we could revisit next year, in the February timeframe as part of the board survey. But if it's something you have an interest in, we're happy to help try and put some resources behind it.
Right.
And I guess I'd also say, I see Sean on here and several teachers and faculty members on here that we don't have to pause during the meeting, but we're more than open to feedback on things that you think would make the survey more effective or more interesting to participate in for staff as well. Please feel free to drop me an email or chat with me.
We
Okay.
both have Miss Goodall tomorrow, so we'll make sure to take a look at her about that.
Okay, great. Anything else on the board survey before we move to the superintendent? Okay, so we just have to agree on the questions for the superintendent survey. This is part of a process the board go through, starting with a 360 and then a board conversation and, ultimately a superintendent evaluation every year. Not the superintendent, the board owns the superintendent evaluation. That's not subject to a popular vote, but it is a piece of input that's useful to the board. So the survey has been pretty standardized for a while. We have 6 ISLIC. ISLIC is the International Society for Superintendents somethings. I guess it's
School leaders.
School Leaders Consortium, yeah. Standards for what to expect from a school leader. We know that there's an update that now has 12, but this board decided that for the students' points about surveys getting too long, that we'd rather survey around the 6th than the 12th. So we're technically dated, but we're pretty happy with surveying around those 6 standards. And then we typically had a couple of one-off kinds of, we've always had an open-ended, anything else you'd like the board to know about evaluating the superintendent's performance. But we've typically had 1 to 4 one-off questions around goals. And so if somebody wants to tell me they don't like the ISLIC standards, I'm open to that conversation. But if we want to keep it focused, just talking about what goals or questions we'd like to survey. Last year we surveyed on challenge all students and mental health and well-being. Oh, that was the one theme I was gonna mention. The other theme on the board survey is there seem to be very mixed opinions. Which is a change. Last year, everybody's like, mental health and well-being is terrible. We need to pay more attention to it. And it moved into a more mixed posture. So I think some efforts have been noticed by some people and are probably not working for some people. But last year, those were the two questions we asked on the superintendent, challenging all students and mental health and well-being. And I think we kind of recognize those were both climate questions rather than superintendent performance questions. But as you'll recall, we had 4 questions we asked about for the board. We asked about challenging and engaging students, engaging in critical thinking. We asked about multiple pathways. We asked about well-being. We asked about deepening family connections. There's not necessarily any direct connection. So I'll just open it up. Are there questions people would like us to ask on the superintendent survey?
I like one, partially because we've gotten some, or we may have noticed some themes on our survey. And some people may respond to a superintendent survey, not a board survey, because superintendent's more, I don't know, it's a more noticeable part of the school. I definitely did not think about boards for a long time, but I always thought about superintendents and principals. So I do think that's a good question to continue. I'm open to another question though, if people,
So keep number 1 as is.
I would like to.
I think that makes sense, especially as you say, given the feedback we saw. Other thoughts? Guess I kind of like the critical engagement, critical thinking engagement question. Could be structured very similar to number 1. It's almost more of a climate question than a evaluation question, but I'd be curious. We also got some feedback on that in the board survey, and like you say, we might get different or more academically expressed opinions on that. So I would be inclined to ask about critical thinking and student engagement.
So what was number 1? Sorry, I don't have it.
Number 1 was challenging all students.
Okay.
I mean, it effectively echoes the multiple pathways, but
Yeah.
well, it also echoes the value of challenging all students that we surveyed in the board survey. So number 1 would be challenging all students. Number 2 would be a similarly worded question about critical thinking and student engagement. And what specifically, the question is, how are we doing? But also, what would you like to see us add or do differently?
So is that in addition to goal 2 here, student and staff mental health, or is that?
Well, that's the next question. Do we want to ask about student and staff mental health and well-being? Again, I think it's been there 2 or 3 years. It's clearly still an issue. You're also obviously welcome to weigh in too, Meredith. That would be useful to you.
I like asking about each of the goals set out in the strategic plan
All
and
6?
structuring it that way. I mean, maybe 6 is probably maybe too many.
I mean, that's what we ended up for the board. We kept 4 out of 6.
Yeah.
I think we didn't ask about DEI and we didn't ask about growth mindset.
But the board also had other questions like fiscal,
That's true.
you had like 3 or
It was-
4 others, so it got to
It was
feel,
longer.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably be a similar number of questions. We could do all 6 goals for the strategic plan.
In addition to this, looks things.
6 districts and
And
6
6.
goals.
I'm fine with that.
Because I think the challenging all students is
It's multiple
implied
pathways.
in multiple pathways.
Yeah.
So if we just structure it around the strategic plan, that might give it just a consistent.
Yeah.
Structure.
Works for me. Do we want to do the Likert scale and then the open-ended or just the open-ended
Oh, I think we do both.
for the goals? Okay.
Can we put a link to the strategic plan in the form, just in the off chance that somebody hasn't heard of it, they can click on it, and look at it.
Off chance.
Nobody's touching it.
I'm optimistic.
We haven't even heard of it. They've all got it memorized.
We mailed it to them.
On the grid.
And I set it up too to see how many people click that link.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
It would be. And I think you can see that through Survey Monkey, can't you?
I think through Survey Monkey, maybe not through Google
Oh,
Forms.
that's true.
Yeah. There's no reason we couldn't switch to Survey Monkey.
Good resource, just in case.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Okay. Sounds like everybody's pretty happy with that.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
Just at the very, did we used to do this in the fall? Because it says the board evaluates and communicates this evaluation to the superintendent every fall.
Oh,
I don't think we've ever done it in the fall.
no, you're correct.
And maybe we could just say every year.
I guess we used to do the survey in the fall. The actual evaluation process was always in the spring.
Yeah.
There was a while where we did 2 evaluations with the superintendent.
We did.
Yeah, we did an informal 6-month. and we
Yes,
did
I
a
remember that.
formal 12-month.
All right.
Yeah, my first year,
Well, that was back when we had.
Yeah.
Concerns.
or you had to.
We had new people
Yeah.
and, you know, meeting in the minds was important, but I think at the present time, we've chosen to drop it back down to 1, but I guess that's what we did, is we did the survey in the fall, and then we did an informal meeting with the superintendent in the fall, and then we did a formal meeting in the spring.
Yeah.
So. But I'm assuming everybody's okay with continuing current practice of a February survey and an April, May formal evaluation. Yeah, okay. That's a good catch, though. I should fix that, Jake. Okay, capital improvement plan update.
Yes,
Just so I'm clear on what we're looking at, it's the last page is what is being proposed for the upcoming budget year, is that right?
yes,
So the color
So far.
coding means,
it's just, we're tracking everything on the list, including what we've done. So I'll share my screen so everyone can follow along.
I was just wanted, when I was reading through this last night, I wasn't 100% sure that I was reading what I thought it, making sense of it the way it was supposed to.
Yep. Okay, so, so there are a couple pages here, and Derek's here tonight. Derek, can you see the screen? Are you following along in Zoom? You can just come forward, because maybe to look at the screen, if you can maybe. So Derek's done a lot of work on getting our existing capital plan updated. And one of the things we want to just look at first is, you know, we started this back in 2024 was really our first year, our fiscal year 2024. So we've had 2 full school years of attacking this list that we set out as a 10-year capital improvement plan. And you know, when we first set the list, I don't know, it was just under 5 million, I want to say. And at the time, we knew that that wasn't going to remain a static list. And that's proven to be true that, I mean, as recently as today, Derek came to me and said, I added something else to the list since we, you know, sent this out to you, something else that, you know, came forward. So it definitely is a dynamic list that's constantly changing as building conditions or issues arise. So what we have at the top of this list that you see that's not highlighted in any color is what's left on the list. And as you recall, when we first established this list, we created 2 different prioritization systems. A prioritization system that was more for infrastructure-based systems, and we prioritized those with numbers 1 through 3. Actually 1 through 5, sorry. And then we had more internal, you know, student facing like classroom or instructional spaces, kind of renovations or needs with the lettering system A through C. And we prioritize those, you know, through discussion with administrators and discussion at this level and I think our facilities committee at that time was still, we looked at this with them and came up with a prioritization system. And I'm really happy to say that with the plans that we have for this coming summer, we will have gotten through all of the priority 1 infrastructure needs. And we're getting close on the priority A classroom and, you know, instructional needs that are known right now. Because, you know, something else could change and change a priority 3 to a priority 1 if something stops working, right? But based on what's known today. And while, you know, Brian mentioned in the survey, there is a feeling that the buildings, you know, are looking run down and need a lot of work, and I get that. We had a lot of catching up to do infrastructure wise. I mean, we've been working on a lot of roofs, and roofs still need to be done. Like, you know, one of the roofs that need to be done is the one we're sitting under right now, and it's the roof that was mentioned in the survey that some, you know, a ceiling tile fell on the employee's desk from leaking. I mean, we are aware and have been working through roof issues. But also trying to not just spend all 500,000 every year on just roofs, trying to also attack some of the, you know, interior space, you know, upgrades that need to be done. But obviously, you know, it's a slow process to work through a roof this long. So scrolling down to see what has been done, there's one item that was just done right away. It's just a small, but really 2024, FY 2024 was when we started in earnest. That was a really big year for roofs. You see, you know, there were 4 roof projects that year. And other than that, it was just some very small interior work. In 2025, which was last summer, there was a lot of work done. There was a big project interior at the high school doing the whole English wing and hallway. That was one of the, you know, most like out of date spaces that we had with temporary walls and what have you. And did a lot of work again with infrastructure, both with ASA, with the playground, with the HVAC system in the grade 1-2 wing, and with the generator and the restrooms at ASA in that same wing. All of those door projects you see listed are part of the COPS grant. And so it's part of our match. It hasn't happened yet. We've been working on trying to get a budget amendment done before we, you know, push go on those projects. But so that a lot of infrastructure work again this year, but we had almost $200,000 it cost to do that English wing project and the hallway associated right there. And then another, what was it, 42,000 for the restrooms down at ASA. So about half of it for interior work and the other half was just infrastructure work last summer. So this summer is listed in red here. It's also listed on the sheet here. I'll show it here. It's a little larger. This is what is on the list right now. We want to finish out the interior classroom upgrades in the grade 1-2 wing at ASA so we can kind of finish that whole wing really from that. And if you walk through ASA, you can kind of see where the additions happened over the years. And there's this threshold that you cross through that's just past the cafeteria around the corner. And then when you enter that wing, so that if we can do everything on this list at ASA, that whole wing will be now taken care of. We also want to begin the work on the OHS bathrooms up here. They really all need a renovation. The number you see on here is going to change. We've just been talking about changing our plans for that. Need to get a new number to put there. And we do have some flexibility in our numbers still and so we'll probably need to bring this back one more time after we get the updated number from OHS bathroom work to get your feedback. The electrical panel, that's still a soft number as well. And that has to be done. It's a safety issue we have to take care of.
Life in your hands.
What's that?
Taking life in your hands.
Yeah, well, it's an old panel and it needs to be replaced. Luckily, the lights don't need to be used for a while, so we can't even get to it right now, which is why we're waiting on the quote. It's a little difficult to get in there right now to see what the electrical contractor needs to see. If you've driven up Goodridge in front of the middle school lately, you know we have to do that road. That's
Looks
on.
like they did some patching.
It is some patching today. We decided we needed to do something to get us by. And so Derek had that done, but we've got to get that road done. And then this roof is the last, and, you know, $500,000 is almost gone with just that. We do have, you know, a little flexibility, so we're gonna wait and see what the bathroom project ends up, costing. The high school is also, looking into vape detectors they'd like to consider. So once we get a cost on that, you know, we can talk as a board if we want to put that in here, or if we want to just put that on the list and choose something else to put in this project. So that's kind of where we are with looking at next year. I think looking at back up to this sheet, this, you know, if you see, you look at these totals, 4,500,000 basically is left to be done from where we are right now. So next summer, we should take off about $500,000 of that list, and we'll be left with 4 million.
But there'll be new stuff added.
There will be some new stuff added probably. But, you know, as you look at the subtotals on the left down bottom, you know, we're beginning after this summer, I think we can say that we will, have one more, the other two bathrooms at the high school will be left. And we can begin to see this list feel like we're having some progress. And, you know, I think that, we'll learn by early June, or by June, we're told, around the middle school construction application. Once we see where that ends up, that's going to inform what we need to do on this list. If we just have to add a whole bunch of middle school stuff to it, if we don't get a favorable rating. Or if we do get a favorable rating, then it also informs things like this space, and
For sure.
we would wait probably on the middle school project in hopes that we could fold this into a middle school project upgrade.
Could we wait on the roof here or?
This
no?
roof cannot wait,
Can't wait.
unfortunately. So,
This is the last of the very high priority roof projects, I think, that was identified 3 or 4 years ago.
Derek, is there one more that's
Yeah.
going to be sooner rather than later?
There's two that have been brought up. We're doing a walkthrough once the roofs are cleared to do an analysis of really what needs to be done. But I've heard a section around the OMS, basketball court roof, not the roof itself, but surrounding that court. And then the high school area, as well, just outside the basketball area. So, we're really looking to get out there and get an assessment of what really needs to be done with the roof systems with Maine folks. And then get it on paper. So that would be good.
Yeah, I think that hallway down in between the PAC and the gym is, and maybe over the locker rooms,
Yeah,
that area, I think, is what you're talking about, right, at the high school?
Yep.
And then at the middle school, we did the gym itself, but we did half of the middle school. That was really urgent, and so it must be on that other half that's beginning to show some issues, so. I mean, now that we've put in our application. We should be held harmless for any updates repairs that we need to do to the middle school. Moving forward, as long as we put in an application every cycle. But, you know, the cycles run. Every 7 years, I think, is the application cycles. And. You know, if you don't get on the list within the first cycle. I'm just really curious to see where we land, and we'll need to have a lot of discussion if we don't land. In the top 10. It looks like based on the current cycle they're in now, I think they're up to project 10. And they had, I don't know, 100 applications. So 90 projects didn't get done, 10 did. On the current list. So it's very competitive. Because there are a lot of schools that have a lot of needs, but I think our school has a lot of needs, and our school is quite old, and. So we'll just have to wait and see, but for the capital improvement plan, we've been. You know, just waiting on pushing off middle school projects other than life safety kind of things. Until we get that feedback on our application.
So like you say, at least we can finally start to do roofs and things without worrying that it's gonna hurt the application.
Right.
Can't do the whole school unfortunately until we figure out some sort of a financing
Right.
process that they don't come through, but the really urgent things, there's,
Derek, would you add anything to the capital improvement picture I described?
Yeah, I mean, those are the big items is, you know, as Meredith said, there's a lot of roof work to be done and that 500,000 can be done and chewed up every year. It's really prioritizing those, and getting them down on paper in terms of a plan to move forward. I'm anxious to hear the news as well, with the state. So that would be interesting to say we had students off site for some years of construction, so that'd be a welcome challenge, no doubt. I think we were the oldest, or one of the oldest on the list in terms of construction, so we're hoping there's good news there. Yeah.
and the other thing I'd mention is there's a few of these, you and I talked about it, but the SREP cycle in 2 years, which means applications starting
Next
not
summer.
this fall, but a year from the summer. So some of the things like the tab air conditioning, which is the last air conditioning that we haven't brought up to the kind of modern Univent. That's the 2-story section in the high school and the generator, and there are a couple of other things.
I also think the other 2 bathrooms at the high
ADA
school could be,
bathrooms.
because those we can
Yeah.
make ADA.
When that new SRF cycle starts, are we able to apply for up to $1 million per school? Or if we get funded for the middle school, we couldn't do SRF for the middle school?
It's now up to 2 million per school.
Per school, okay.
Yes.
And it's
And what we
decoupled from
did,
major.
what we got the last cycle doesn't count against that. This starts all over.
We will be far enough away from that
Okay.
because it's 1 million every 5 years. And we were funded in 2020,
Okay, so we're good.
so we'll be far enough away from that. But they raised the limit to 2 million per cycle. But I just looked at the list for this year and hardly any schools applied. I mean, they had, I don't know, 10 projects, but only 4 got funded.
And the state programs has a mismatch with what schools need, right?
Yeah.
SRF is great, but the schools don't need 500,000 here and 500,000 there. They don't always necessarily need 50 million for a new building either. The 5 to 10 million, like what we would help us with is really a missing gap in their program. So
Well, and there was a study committee, that the legislature commissioned that is giving a report this spring, back to the legislature to recommend changes. And that was one of the big issues that came up, is there has to be something in between the $100 million new school and 2 million to, fix your roof that is leaking, or, and or air quality issues. And also the other big issue that came up from discussions I was a part of was the funding mechanism in the state is not adequate to meet the needs. And there has to be another solution for how to fund the great need that just is becoming more and more of a backlog. So, there are no easy answers to that for the state, I know, but it's a real issue that's going to have to be dealt with.
but the SRFs in particular, having an ongoing relationship with an architect and having the projects identified a year in advance really does have, kind of to your point of not many applications.
Yeah,
That's something we were very well positioned for coming out of our last construction project, but we all need to collectively remember to be well positioned again.
yeah, we'll need to start working on the tab, how the design for what we want to do. I don't know. Maybe as early as next fall.
Yep.
Because it takes time to work through that process, and at least having something ready to make an application for. We already know the generator, we already have that spec'd out and estimated. And the bathrooms, we can get those estimated if we, try to do
So
the,
the generator, that would be the high school generator.
yeah, I really would like to do that this year, but it's half our budget and, we just can't, I don't see a way to do that. half our capital improvement budget. It's on the list. 200.
How bad is the Ace and back parking lot? Really bad?
It's comparable to Goodrich Drive
Right.
in Aquarius, yeah.
Yeah.
Cause if we could put that on, we could take that and then we could cover half of it. If
Yeah.
it's that bad, then it can be.
There's an economy of scale of doing that while we do Goodrich Drive
Right.
also.
I mean, maybe the point worth reminding people in the audience is that there was a conscious decision about 3-4 years ago to significantly up our maintenance budget, which had historically bounced around between 100 and 200,000 and was, you know, net losing ground versus the decay of buildings. And we have upped that to $500,000 a year. And as this list shows, we're not fixing everything next year, but we are net back to a place where we're gaining ground instead of losing ground. So I think that's a positive signal, while at the same time respecting taxpayer limitations and, you know, not spending millions of dollars a year. So
Any feedback on this list for next year at this point? You know, we do have to bring back a couple of revisions to these numbers. But, you know, we may have a little room to add something to the list. Is there something that catches your eye? Is something you feel?
Can I just ask one specific question about one line?
Sure.
For the high school, it says motion hall lights. It's only $5,000, but where are those? And do we not have any lighting in this hallway?
The hallway lights, we have lights,
Right,
just changing them out to be motion
Oh,
activated
okay.
and, you know, more energy saver
gotcha.
lights.
Thank you.
And there's a bit of a rebate, so a lot of these numbers are estimates because it's really difficult. People don't want to give you estimates on projects you don't have any plans to do in the near future, like this year. So a lot of these are estimates based on past work or, you know, our facilities director kind of Brent first and then Bill and now Derek kind of, you know, shaping these numbers as conditions change. We've increased our classroom renovation estimates somewhat, and you know, this says $25,000 per room. This year's estimate's $27,500 per room, so we probably need to up the rest of these to that.
yeah, construction costs are not slowing down, unfortunately.
Do we still have a dark room?
We have one. It's just, you know,
What's in it?
It's dark.
Like stuff stored in it, or is it like dark and it's very awkward?
Sam, Meredith, do you have what's in the dark room?
Right now, it's kind of like a storage spot, to be fair. But we're cleaning it out and trying to get ideas and work with Derek, obviously. But right now, it's just primarily storage for science, or to be honest, I put yearbook and cap and gown and stuff up there when we run out of space at that time of year as well.
I mean, to me, the process is working and I don't have any big suggestions or alternatives in the proposals.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead and move on to the budget.
Okay.
Then did you come to the?
No.
You came just to
He
see
just
us?
came 'cause he wanted to say hi. So, this is the time of year where each meeting, you know, we have more answers, more clarity around budget. And I have to say, unfortunately, the biggest change this meeting is, you know, in the bad news arena around insurance. We got a memo from Anthem or from the MEA Benefits Trust that basically told us that the quote back from Anthem was a 17.89% increase. And that they don't have capacity in their reserves to buy this down as they have in previous years, but they've never really had one that large either. And so, you know, and they gave reasons in increased, you know, cost of healthcare and pharmacy costs, and the fact that, they're not ending the year with as much in reserve because of these extra costs. And so their unassigned has been basically depleted compared to previous years. And so they were just warning folks that you probably want to plan on a higher than normal increase. But they didn't really say what we should do. We anticipate we're still going to get a ceiling on March 27th, a ceiling of what the range will be. It'll be really interesting to see if they set a ceiling below 17.89.
I'm mistaken that the ceiling's always been 10, right?
No, one year it was 12 something.
Okay.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's been 10% or less than 10% by the time we get.
10% is what we just always.
10 is what we put in.
10 is what we typically budget. Last year we budgeted a little less than that just because we've been doing so well historically. But given that news and Lynn kind of reached out to her business manager colleagues, and most people are going up to 17.89 for now. That's what we've done. We went up to 17.89 until we hear about the ceiling. And then we can make an adjustment if our ceiling, you know, is less than that. That was a really big add from last time you saw this to now. So I'm just gonna share my screen so that everyone, whoops. Okay, so last time we talked about this, our increase in taxes was 363,000. And largely due to the insurance change, it's now almost 460,000. It's $9 short of that. There were some other changes that I'm gonna ask Lynn to highlight that, you know, are 4-figure changes. But those are kind of the typical things we have this time of year. The insurance is not typical. So the more typical things we've seen, Lynn, are what?
So in this one, there is we had to add some costs back in for 9th grade program, just because we're not sure where the grant is gonna lie, so that was a total of 8,500 that we added in that was not in here before. We had some adjustments to tech things, due to E-rate. In a good way, we were able to put 9,000 on the revenue side because our Wi-Fi managed services can go under E-rate and we can get half of that back, 18,000 back. So we put that under 9,000, and the $40,000 project that we had in there for the
Wireless access.
the wireless access controls. We were cut down to 20 because how E-rate works with that company is they only bill us for our half. It's not a reimbursement model like the managed Wi-Fi. So that was able to be a good adjustment on our end. Then we had an increase from the town for our SRO. Not a change in our agreement, it's just they had a new contract and a couple other things happened with the person that we have. So we ended up having to add in 7,900 for the SRO. You know, just some changes, some more people coming out wanting to take classes. We had to add 3,800 more there. So where we had a pretty big decrease now isn't as big, but it's still a decrease from last year. Another positive is, although our health insurance is doing crazy things, our property and casualty insurance rate came in, the ceiling is lower than what we had in there. So we were able to decrease that by 9,000. And then there was just other various things that came up, you know, someone because of a change didn't need something or realized that maybe it was somewhere else. So we were able to take out another 8,200, not on the potential reductions. These are things that we did not need anymore. So those are kind of on the expense side, things that made that change. On the revenue, the only change was the 9,000 in E-rate. But something else to consider, as of right now, we currently have 17 ninth graders pre-registered. And we've budgeted on 22. I don't think we're at a point yet that we would need to change it, but something we're gonna have to definitely watch. In the next few weeks to see where that number goes. Because as we know, we usually have some trickle late, but we also have some that register in multiple schools and don't actually attend. So, you know, we'll just watch that closely for the next couple of weeks and see what information we can get. We have had pretty much every high school except for Indian Island have kids register, so it's not like we're missing a whole district that hasn't registered yet. We have kids from all the other sending schools, so.
And Indian Island has a very small
Very
eighth grade this year. I want to say like 4 or 5.
And yeah, and we may not get any.
Yeah. So any questions about that information? Want to give you a chance to ask about that before we get to the potential reductions page. So when we last met, you indicated that you hoped we could get, you know, down close. Some of you indicated that you wanted to see some reductions with the goal of maybe getting toward, closer to a 0% tax or 0 tax increase. And so we started working on a list of ideas and bring that to you as kind of a first round of thinking. I mean, the insurance picture is going to sharpen for us, come into more focus over the next few weeks. But probably, well, sometimes Anthem comes in before the benefits trust comes in before the deadlines they've set for themselves. So there's a chance we'll know the ceiling before our next meeting, but the deadline they've advertised is not until March 27th, which is after our next meeting. So we may or may not know that. So for now, we, you know, have other ideas to bring to you. In yellow on this sheet are either these fall into several categories, either areas that, you know, we look back on expenditure patterns over the last several budget cycles and see that, you know, we're consistently underspending in a line, or something has changed in a line, and as we were looking at expenditure patterns, it kind of was made clear to us in a way that wasn't when we were building the budget. So some reductions are for that reason. Other reductions are just people, you know, taking a closer look at new information like around enrollments, class sizes coming up, or, you know, anticipated kind of course enrollments with a little more clarity to refine some budget requests for curriculum materials mainly. And then there were just some other items as we built the budget that, you know, Lynn and I were looking at historical patterns and, you know, pointing those out that, you know, you're asking for X amount more for field trips, but we haven't spent that line down even close for, you know, 5 years. Why are we asking for more? We're going to leave it in for now, but we're going to come back and look at that if we have to. So some of it's that kind of idea. And others are just people, you know, as an administrator went around to check in with people saying, you know, we could offer this forward because we could do something different, or I really don't think we're going to do that trip, so we're going to, you know, put that on the list, or those kinds of responses. So this list was really constructed from all of those angles. And I think we feel like that list is a list that we feel really would not impact the quality of student experience next year in any way that would be noticeable to students. And, you know, does not yet get into kind of painful reductions, in my opinion. I think, you know, there's more that can be done, but it would begin to feel impactful and painful in a different way, I think. There may be more though that comes to our, you know, into focus as we just think more about this, or more information comes forward as we learn more about course requests, for example, or we learn more about the incoming high school class. So those are just areas that are still a little unclear, particularly at the high school where, you know, course requests really drive a lot about, you know, curricular needs and supply needs and such. The one-time expenditure list, as a reminder, those are items that we're not suggesting those are eliminated from the budget. We're putting those forward as ideas for things that you could consider funding through unassigned fund balance that aren't recurring costs. So you're not going to see that come up again next year as a need and then have a hole you have to fill with, you know, your budget outside of unassigned. So that list came up to 163,000. We feel like, you know, some of this we talked about last time, like the ELA curriculum. We aren't recommending that we fund all of it with unassigned, but it's such a large, I mean, it's a very unusual size purchase for us. When we have a new curriculum adoption, usually it's 30 or 40,000 if we're adopting, but this one is, you know, going to be 2 years of around $72,000. So we're suggesting that we budget 40 of that from unassigned for 2 years, and have 32,000 stay in the budget for both of those years for the curriculum, because that's more of a typical recurring amount in our budget. The wireless access point replacement, as Lynn talked about, it was 40,000 when we first talked about the budget, but because we know more about E-rate now, we only will be charged 20,000 for that out of our budget. So that's the amount that's here. You know, I think everything else on here is pretty self-explanatory. The last item is a potential staff reduction that we're putting forward for us to think about. You know, we've looked at the high school enrollment, and over, what would this be? 4 years. Next year would be the 5th year. We will have dropped by 50 students at the high school. Our high was in 22-23 at 778. And if we get the 22 that we're expecting and the middle school numbers stayed the same of 8th graders coming up, we would be at 728 as a high school.
That was nice.
I'm sorry, 328, 328. So 378 was our high.
Step up game magic.
Yeah, and 328 would be next year's enrollment if all stayed the same. So, you know, the issue is we've lost those big 2 classes that came through. The last one's graduating this year. And so it puts all of our classes kind of in this 70 to 80 student range, which is definitely a different, you know, feel for the high school in terms of, you know, enrollment. So that's one of the reasons you know, we have eliminated a half-time English teacher and a half-time social studies teacher over the last couple of years in response to drops that we were seeing and opportunities we saw to just be more efficient with class size. As we've talked about when we've looked at class size reports, we still have, you know, a number of small sections at the high school. And it's not any one area necessarily, or any one area that's, you know, easily solvable. And, you know, this area is not altogether easily solvable, but we see a way to make this reduction and offload some of the courses that have stronger enrollments to other places in the building where we have some small class size that needs to be, that could be, you know, collapsed into one instead of two sections in places. And then utilize, like early college or AP for me, for example, or AP computer science. And, you know, this particular, position, while it's never easy, seems like the one that we see a way forward with. And when you lose 50 students, I mean, yeah, that's a significant number. And that's why we're seeing there's a lot of lower class sizes in our high school, and some of them are due to, you know, some courses that we don't want to let go of that are single section courses. You know, we want to continue to offer, but some of them are, you know, we have two small sections of the same course that really we can run one section that's going to be more typically sized. And so, you know, that's really the only place that we see a place to realize enough savings to make it worth doing. Because it's anything else that we have explored, there just isn't enough there to realize the whole position.
Do we know the class sizes that are taught currently by this person?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like ballparks? Are those like single digits or the double digits?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So, some of the courses are only semester in length and some are a year in length. So, all but, well, the AP Computer Science has 10, and that's a year-long course. 3D modeling has 21 in one section and 12 in another. Everything other than that is single digits. So,
How many other, you said everything else is single digit.
so there's a computer science discoveries that's 5 students. And we feel like that class is probably cycled through in terms of, it doesn't feel like that's where technology needs are anymore for students. They really are beyond that level, and it was designed, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe when the landscape was a little different, and students are opting into other classes now. Coding has 9, robotics has 4, and then 6 in another section. And the publications class, which does yearbook, has 9. So,
Meredith, I think some of those numbers are also first semester.
yeah, it was across first and second semester. I'm just giving the complete picture. So, you know, first semester, the course load, including the AP and the publications, which are year-long courses, was 54. Second semester with those 2 courses plus the others, the course load's 41. So that's the list right now. Typically at this point, you know, you ask some questions and, you know, either ask us to bring back more information or more, you know, ideas for you, or go further with it, or ask us to prioritize it in some way. Sometimes at this point also, it's just informational and we wait until we have more information about other pieces like insurance, tuition, student, numbers feel more solid.
Well, I appreciate all the work that went into getting this list together in all 3 categories. Speaking, obviously, just for me, I guess my preference at this point is just to keep everything on this list and wait until the next meeting and see what additional information we have at that point. You know, insurance and tuition are, I think, the two biggest areas where we may see movement, and it could go in either direction, it can be consistent between the two, it could not be, but without having more information on that. But also given what we do know about insurance, which is not good, I'd like to keep all this stuff on the list for now. And obviously, if anything else presents itself to go on to any of these lists, then obviously add that. But I wouldn't want to take anything off.
I was just looking at the timeline, so we have a March 25th meeting, which unless they're early, will be before the insurance update. Now we have an April 8th. That April 8th is typically where we try and give final instructions so that you can go off and get the lawyers to write the warrants, and we sign the warrants at the April 29th. Is that the right timeline?
Yeah.
So really, the April 8th is kind of,
Well, April 8th is the timeline I need to get on my book. April 29th is final budget approval for warrant preparation. So we don't sign warrants until May 6th. So
Okay.
April 8th, you really need to,
it's final instruction,
Yeah.
basically.
April 29th is the approval.
Is we vote on a
Yeah.
document that's already been prepared without
Yeah.
having to amend it. Yeah. And so, yeah, April 8th is final instructions, but we do. You may or may not have a lot more information, but we do have the March 25th meeting. Unless, there's something else we want the administration to bring back for the March 25th meeting. I mean, personally, I'm in the same place Mark is. I feel like there's a list. I'm not looking for more cuts. All things standing the way they are today, which they probably won't. I would probably take the complete list and take an extra 100,000 out of unassigned carry forward, which will get us down into maybe optics, but it'll get us down into 5 figures in tax increase instead of 6 figures, and it'll get the tax increase down to about 1/10 of a mil, which is pretty small, but there's lots of information still to be coming in, so I guess I'm in the same place as Mark. I'm not looking for more work. I think the biggest variable left for me is, let's see what changes come in and let's see what we want to do with the carry forward. And I don't think there's more work to do.
I'm in that same boat, but can we talk about carry forward for a minute? Am I correct? Right now, our carry forward, right now we have 2.7 million, is that right? And we're looking to put this year $100,000 proposal on top of this would be 1.1 carry forward, right?
Yeah.
And, this year, we've,
But yeah, I know.
okay.
It could be 2 years, so I realize that's another number.
Well, I was just gonna say that, we've dedicated around 380,000 out of unassigned to one-time expenditures, the Melty project and capital reserve in this year, so 2.7 is what the audited
Correct.
the audit showed at the end of FY 24.
Brian, with your proposal, what will that bring the carry forward down to, like basically the bank account?
2.4 million. If all of those things ended up going against our unassigned, it would bring it down to 2.4 million. From 2.7.
Yeah, because most of the carry forward is really. Careful with this word, the budget pattern, right? We really don't expect to be spent and to come pop back out next year.
Correct.
And so, but the one-time expenses, we think are gonna drive things down. They didn't last year, right? I would be skeptical that we ever drive our balance down unless we take big chunks of money out of it. But in principle, balance, the 900,000 seems to be our current steady state of what goes in and comes back out, so that putting 900,000 in sounds like we're taking 900,000 of the bank account, but really it's just a circle.
Yeah, last year, our net change in unassigned was 91,000.
Right. And that was how much one-time purchases, just a couple 100,000.
350.
They only dropped things by 90, so really we were 200,000. Really the carry forward, it's just 700, 900 is now.
And Lynn's going to do the, end of year projection exercise after, last warrant in March. So you'll have that at your April 8th meeting as well. For what it's worth, right, Lynn?
Favorite activity.
And to your point, we want to think about where we end up, but we want to think about where we end up with this extra padding of, if federal funds disappear for a couple of years, right? So it's not money we're spending, but we'd like to make sure there's $1 million plus of reserve left. Right. But starting at 2.7, maybe taking 250 in one-time expenses and another 100,000 takes us down to about 2.4, 2.35. Which still feels like, you know, given that it's a catastrophic worst case, we have to cover federal expenses for 2 years, that still leaves us with 1.3 million, which is, you know, we've all been on the board when that was a high number instead of a low number. So.
What does that end? I thought maybe we had floated the idea last time of maybe using unassigned to avoid a tax increase at all. Given if you're bringing it down to 5 digits, then just taking a little bit more out and just telling the community, you know, things are tough right now, but we've got it covered.
I'd be open to that conversation too.
And I guess I would agree about keeping things on the list, though I'm hesitant, always hesitant about staffing. Especially this subject, given its sort of modern relevance. It seems unfortunate to remove that focus from the high school. You know, seems unfortunate. Let's say that for now.
Well, I didn't fully explain our thoughts because they still need to, we need to test those against course requests to figure out exactly how it's going to work. But there's some people who either have taught some of these courses for us in the past or are also teaching some courses now who may have some capacity to pick up some of these courses. So these courses aren't all going away in our minds. They're going to be shifting some of them to other places where we see some opportunity to do that.
In particular, some of the high enrollment courses that have been taught by other people in the past.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a cut I'd prefer not to make. So let's, you know, move on insurance and tuition but on the other hand, you know, the student numbers are just really markedly down at the high school and we've expected ASA and we've expected middle school to make adjustments when bubbles go through and come out again. And you know,
We can't keep the same staff and keep shedding students. We just can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're shedding a few students. We're down a significant number of students at the high school.
So there's probably not a whole lot more to say unless somebody's on a totally different page, but I don't think we're looking for the administration to come up with more cuts than are on the table.
No.
And the conversation is going to come down to more information and how much we want to take out and carry forward.
I would agree. I just did have one question. I know that this is coming up soon, but is the contract that we're about to get presented in line with the number did you adjust that number or was it the same?
It was right in line with what we predicted might be an
So that didn't go up or down. It's just, okay, thank you.
Okay, you done with budget for now?
Yes.
Do you have everything you need, Meredith?
Yes. Len, do you need anything?
I did not see any co-curricular nominations. So we'll go ahead and move on to policies. We discussed these briefly last time. This is a response to a combination of federal changes, which changed the procedure primarily. So the -R, PCA-R and ACAP-R of how we do investigations, but also updates in terms of changes in the Maine Human Rights Commission law in terms of what are considered discriminatory practices. So we kind of has the first piece, the change to the -R is ready last time, but we realized by reverting, we'd reverted too much and not kept up to date with the Maine human rights. So we feel comfortable. Sam has done a lot of work to make sure that these are all up to date and accurate with current law and consistent with what Drummond and Woodson's recommending. Yeah, anything you would add to that, Sam?
No, but just thanks to Meredith Higgins. She's been doing it right along with me because it's really hard and confusing. And I really appreciate that we're doing it together so that I can do right by our students and staff. So thank you also, Meredith.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, these are some of the longer, more complicated policies. I'm tempted to do them all as a unit. Does anybody want me to break them out?
Could you summarize if there's been any sort of noticeable changes that administration or students might notice if one of these policies were invoked?
Well, so they're all changes required either by main law or federal regulation, so they're probably not optional, but to summarize, let's see, I think the main law recognized gender identity and student hair as protected categories
And familial status.
and familial status, so we wanted to make sure that those were included as protected in our policy. Well, they're required by law, so they're protected regardless of whether we have them or not, but we wanted to make sure our policy was accurate for local reference. And the federal changes were primarily in the -R policies about how investigations proceed. And I don't know how much you followed, but when Biden came in, he changed the regulation, how things were investigated, and we had to change all of our policies to match the Biden process. And when Trump came in, he rolled things backwards.
Back to where you had.
Reverted.
Yeah, and so we had to, but it's Title IX regulation, it is binding regulation. This is not a case of an executive order that doesn't have clear legal status. This is a case of a regulation that the president has a right to make, and so we're reverting back. To be perfectly honest, there's some differences in primarily rights of the accused having a little more right to access about. Anything you would summarize, Sam, about the changes in the process?
Yeah, so to be honest, my efforts and my hope and goal is to not have any of these things impact our students and staff and their families or anyone who's involved as least as possible. It definitely affects, not trying to sound like I'm whining here, but it definitely affects me and whomever is assisting me in doing the processes. And it's more complicated. I did appreciate the previous one, how they broke them apart. So there was like an R1 and an R2 for affirmative action versus Title IX. That made it clearer and easier for me and those helping me to do the investigations. But overall, yeah, some of the greatest differences are the pieces of evidence and sharing those and the timeframes that are required for parties to be able to view those and offer feedback, suggest we do more questioning, yada, yada, yada. So, but like I said, I really hope that in the end, when people are in these investigations involved with me and with whoever administration's involved, that they just feel supported and that we do it as seamlessly and as positive as possible. It's my goal.
To me, one of the big changes that moving back to this causes is something Sam just alluded to, which is there are a lot of points that you have to pause for 5 or 10 days at different junctures to give the parties a chance to review and respond. And there's several of those in the policies we're having to move back to. So it really kind of extends out the process. I mean, in a way that sometimes in the life of a school can feel like a really long time to get something figured out and addressed.
The bottom line on all of these changes is not a single one of these changes is discretionary on our part. I mean, it's all either state required or federal required. So whether we like them or whether we don't like them, the reality is we have to. Right?
Yeah, I understand that. I just thought it'd be helpful, for the odd person that watches the recording to know what the differences might be.
I mean,
No, I agree. I think we should also note that it is 8 o'clock. So
yeah, I was gonna say, it's 8 o'clock, students' attendance is appreciated, and welcome to depart. The other change, if I remember correctly, is there is a bit of more of a due process separation of the superintendent not getting involved in the initial investigation to be able to serve as
That was actually the Biden ones.
that was the Biden one. So, okay, so we're undoing that
Yeah.
change. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right. Anybody object if we deal with these as a unit? They're all revisions. So I make a motion to recognize revisions to policy ACAA-R, harassment and sexual harassment of students and complaint procedure, and ACAB and ACAB-R, harassment and sexual harassment of employees and complaint procedure. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? We can go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Thank you, Sam and Meredith, for the work on that. Approval of the FY 26 calendar. I think we've seen this and been discussing this, but anything you want to add, Meredith?
No, this is the version that's the 2 weeks off, December, end of December through New Year's.
This was the version 2 that we've been
Yes.
looking at. I would make a motion to approve the calendar for RSU 26 school year FY 25-26 as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Opposed? That passes 3-1. I forgot there.
Get ahead of yourself.
Yeah,
One thing I will say is I thought after I said that was the only thing, the OEA does need to do a agree to an MOU about the early release day extension, so I'll be bringing that to you. If we can get that, if not, then we might have to come back and offer a revised version of the calendar. So.
Okay.
But people are asking for it, so hoping to get this published sooner rather than later.
next up, we have the transportation contract.
Yeah, so what I provided for you is just really the bottom line, the rates page, that this is part of a really 15-page contract that we draft that follows the RFP that we put out, which outlined all the requirements that we would want for, or would ask or require that the bidding contractors agree to. We, we're hoping to get more than one bid. We just got one bid again. And it was from Sierra Bus. These are the rates that they've given us. There is a new element that they're including in our, their proposal. And that is to add, wait time payments to drivers. So when a driver goes on a bus to Presque Isle and has to then sit there and wait at, a soccer tournament or game for 4 hours and then come back, that we're gonna have to pay for that wait time at that hourly rate. Apparently this is in a number of their other contracts and they're just closing the loop, trying to get it in all the contracts. I understand their need to charge for that. It is an impact on our budget. They did hold the mileage rate consistent for this coming year and the next year. Just in recognition of the fact they know that's an additional budgetary item for us, which I appreciated them doing that. I did ask around and it is in the contracts of most of our neighbors.
So in the past, were they just paying them themselves?
Yeah. And I'm sure their costs have gotten to the point that it's hard for them to absorb that. Particularly with long,
Oh, yeah, I
Wait.
just assumed that was all part of it.
yeah. But what I've learned is they structure contracts really differently depending on the district. I mean, some districts are billed per bus, per route, as opposed to mileage. And it's just different, district to district.
What does this work out to? It's hard to understand what $2.86 a mile.
If you
means.
look at, well, no, you don't have this level of details. Let me just tell you the contracted total that we have built in for
Total miles over 170 some odd days.
393,000.
Huh.
Over the course of the year. Now that does not include, we also pay for, aside from that, because we feel like it's better for us to buy diesel. We buy 15,000 gallons of diesel that Sear uses over the course of the year. And we shop around for that and try to get a really good rate. Some contracts, they include that in. We feel like we have more control of it if we just, find the diesel and make sure it's, as good a rate as we can find.
What do we just have it do with
Yeah,
the year?
yeah, they know wherever we purchased it from and they pick it up. Or we deliver it, I'm not sure which way it goes.
They call and they say, we need it.
Yeah,
And we say.
so that's what it adds up to.
Oh.
And so it's an increase in our budget of around 50,000 for this wait time.
Which is about 10%? 15,
A little more.
but it's the first time last contract was 5 years, right?
Right,
So it's the first time the inflationary period has been rolled into the contract, so.
the other thing they did is last time they gave us the year 4 and 5 rates and this year they're not.
Hmm.
But last
Just
time they
a-
got caught with COVID, you know.
It's just a 3-year contract at this point.
But the other thing I put in the contract is a requirement for the swing arms out that we've talked about wanting, that our
That's great.
buses didn't have, and they're very agreeable to putting those on.
Oh, all right. That feels better.
Yeah, I mean, they're a good partner to work with, they really are. It would be nice to have competition, to feel like, you know. But for the most part, I feel like we have better luck with our drivers being consistent and not having this revolving door. I heard of, you know, districts struggling to have enough drivers to have schools some days, and we just haven't had that problem, and unfortunate.
So there are districts who have no bids on their contracts too, and are having to look at starting their own busing. So,
This wait time change is yet another reason to know this is not something we control, but I've thought for years that high school sports teams in Maine do too much, many of them do way more travel than they need to do. And I think we're one of those schools that we don't play lots of people closer to us that we could play, in exchange for middle of the week trips to Holton in some cases, which I think is ridiculous. I think this just makes that even more ridiculous. I would put on my complaint to the NPA app.
time to start lobbying the NPA.
So would we see those swing arms in the fall?
Yeah, didn't they say they could get them?
Listen, I
Yeah.
totally support those swing irons, but you know a college kid's gonna take one of them out.
Good.
Well,
Right on the end of my street, I can tell when the bus comes, I don't wait by the road anymore because the kids are older, I can tell when the bus is there by the honking. So the fact that there's gonna be a big iron bar that some college kid has to crash into and wreck their vehicle,
yeah.
you know?
Might get a
Fine with
little
that.
attention on campus, so.
Yeah.
I can see our first claim now.
All right, yeah, you'll be on the.
It's just another visual reminder, because it's not just an arm, it's an arm with some lights that flash on it too. So.
I would like to see if they can add like spikes. in front of it.
Electric,
Heavy lead weights.
the shark.
There's a couple of little kids that have to cross the road. My kids don't have to cross the road, but there's a family across the street and they've got some little kids and they have to wait, and make sure there's not a car ripping through there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason, there's a law of stop in both directions, is because kids have a propensity to run off a bus and run across the street to their parents, so.
So this is the, you know, it just swings out. As opposed to just the one stop sign, it has the arm and another stop sign that swings out.
Mhm.
So
That's
No
great.
spikes.
Those-
there's
yeah,
spikes, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not
Next
quite as,
contract.
you know,
We'll escalate.
intimidating as it sounded, but.
We can customize.
The volunteer work.
So I am, I need to take the contract to the bidder, but I wanted to ask for your approval for me to authorize this contract following these. Accept these rates.
I make a motion to authorize the superintendent to execute the contract with Sierra Bus as presented. Is there a second?
A second?
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Next up, stipend approvals. We can probably take these as unit 2, but you want to introduce all 3?
Yes, so we have 2 stipends that are coming forward as a year 1 trial for this year. The OMS Afternoon Volleyball Intramural Club is just a way to bring volleyball to middle schoolers. They've already started. You know, we wanted them to go ahead and do that because the idea is it's in between their seasons. After the February season's in, but before the spring seasons begin. And then the OMS OHS Science Fair. We've had significant work happening in that realm, through Katie Quirk and her work with students. And then the high school had some work they were trying to do with that. And so they were both coming, or the high school one came to us and we said, we really need to see if we can streamline this. So it came to us as a combined, stipend request to just acknowledge that, yes, there's some work that happens during the school day, but a lot of it is after school and supporting students through individual meetings and consultations. And then, taking them to events. So that's a trial for this year. And then the OMS Unified Basketball you approved last year. This year would be trial number 2. And we ask you, those are the 3 we're ready to bring forward.
I would make a motion to approve the 3 trial stipends as presented. The OMS Volleyball Intramural Trial Year 1, OMS OHS Science Fair Trial Year 1, OMS Unified Basketball Trial Year 2. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Subcommittee reports, policy subcommittee met. I actually missed that, but you saw the main output. There's also work on the generative AI guidelines. We'll have an update at the next board meeting. Nothing too substantial, but honestly, I was pretty pleased that it was in the realm of tweaks, given how shot in the dark it seemed when we first adopted those guidelines, but there will be some tweaks coming forward. Anything new with the UTC?
I think just what I shared and what Meredith shared is focusing on student contributions and excellence.
Okay, curriculum subcommittee is meeting this Thursday at 3:30. As I recall, the ASA ELA and the high school 9th grade. Have I got that right, Susan? Around the agenda?
ASA ELA yet, but
Not yet.
course proposals in high school 9th grade.
That's it. Yep, thank you.
It's a super long agenda because the last meeting was canceled because of a snow day. So if we clear this agenda on Thursday, I'm just done.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Wellness committee, I was not here. I don't think they've met. Strategic plan hasn't met since. Yeah, that's correct, since the last board meeting. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Is there any public comment? The floor is open for public comment.
Yes, Brian, I have a comment.
Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shauna Goodall. I'm the Orono Education Association president. And I guess to paraphrase the Lorax, I speak for the trees. And so I speak for the Orono High School faculty and staff. And of course, we are very concerned about any budget cuts that include staff. And we are very concerned about the ones that have been presented today. And we are equally concerned with the addition of the halftime assistant position in the system office when there are cuts in other buildings. And so we just want to make sure that we voiced that concern of ours and that everybody is, taking a little bit of pain. I will freely admit I was not able to attend the last board meeting where I'm sure you discussed the need for the halftime assistant position in the system office, but we are concerned about that because, it's hard to lose student-facing resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sentiments appreciated and understood. Just to briefly recap, there is some significant, if we do go ahead with the CDS, there will be some significant, basically new students, age two, I think, 3, 4, 4-year-old students, with special needs and substantial billing requirements. We're also, this position has existed previously, and was cut for a couple of years. And so those are the 2 thoughts on that particular position, without going into a whole lot of detail. Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, our next board meeting is March 25th at 6 o'clock in the library and on Zoom. Any request for information or follow-up from the board? Seeing none, I would motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.